Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. I'm Dan Fetes, and believe it or not, football is, well, it's right around the corner. 3 teams reported to training camps today. The Bills rookies report tomorrow. The Bills' first practice is next week, so it is right upon us. And as we continue to kind of preview what's going on here and kind of continue to dissect this team more and more, as we approach training camp, we will have full coverage of you guys from there. I wanted to do something today where I looked at just some hot takes as what I think will happen or could happen or maybe even should happen on this upcoming season. I wrote an article on buffaloplus.com. They're my 5 hot takes for the upcoming season. And we'll kind of get right into it. Number 1 is I think Josh Allen will lead the team in rushing yards in 2021. And this is based off a couple of things. As you guys know, I'm just not a fan of running the football to begin with, as well as the fact that maybe I'm just not as high on Devin Singletary or even Zach Moss as I am on Josh Allen. And this is also how defenses will play Allen this upcoming season, because the last 2 years, they've pretty much loaded the box and dared him to throw the football. You remember Jalen Ramsey saying, we want to make him a passer. Well, he showed last year that if you do that, he has advanced and has progressed and has grown his game enough where he will hurt you. So I think now I remember talking to Warren Sharp, who talked about the fronts and the safeties dropping in the boxes, daring Josh to throw. And as we saw last year, he was so good against the blitz. He was so good on one-on-ones and man coverage that I think that defenses will now have to adjust. And I think when Josh has made that progression enough that when linebackers drop back all of a sudden and turn their backs to him, Josh will know when to take off and run. And I don't think that all this talk about the Bills want to run the ball more effectively and all of those things can be true. I just don't think they're going to be this team that is now going to try and run the ball 35 times a game. I think they're going to put the ball in Josh Allen's hands. And I think as teams try to take away Stephon Diggs, as they try and deal with Emmanuel Sanders, as they try and deal with some of those things, I think Josh will advance and use his legs more. We saw him do it. He led the team in rushing yards in 2018. So, this isn't impossible. Now, only a few quarterbacks have done it, Josh being one of them. And obviously, Josh is second in the league since he entered the league in rushing yards. For a quarterback, he's only behind Lamar Jackson. So, I think there are a couple of things, the way defenses will handle him, the way they're going to adjust, and how Josh Allen will adjust too as you get into this cat and mouse game. Staying on the offensive side, my second hot take would be just, I think the fact that Emmanuel Sanders will catch 1,000 yards this year. I just look at this offense and I go back to last year where somebody's got to have another 1,000-yard season, just with how many weapons they have around him. And I know Josh spreads the ball around so well, but when John Brown was healthy, Josh Allen had that deep threat, and Sean McDermott called his fastball. And when I got it, and the more I looked at how Emmanuel Sanders will fit into this offense as to be that guy, and I know he's in his early 30s, but he still got it. And I think that at times with the Saints last year in New Orleans, like they just couldn't push the ball down the field. Drew Brees didn't have the arm. And we have seen that without John Brown last year, the Bills didn't have that threat to take the top off the defense. And I think Emmanuel Sanders will bring that back. So I see Emmanuel Sanders catching 65, 70 balls and a couple of them being 65-plus yarders for touchdowns. So he had about 700 yards last year with New Orleans, and a lot of stuff was underneath. I think he catches a few big ones, and I can see Emmanuel Sanders, and I know everybody's so high on Gabe Davis having a big year, and Cole Beasley. I can see them regressing to the means a little more, and I can see in this offense this fit that I like with Emmanuel Sanders, him now stepping up and having Diggs and Sanders being the first Bills wide receiver duo to each have 1,000 yards since 2002. And if you remember this, Eric Moulds and Peerless Price were the last 2 Bills teammates in the same season to catch 1,000 yards. I think the Bills do it this season, and I think it's with Diggs and it's with Sanders because of the fit of being that guy, because we saw when John Brown was healthy how Allen wanted to push the ball down the field. And I think Stephon Diggs will be doubled way more this year. Look, Diggs was number 1 in the league in receptions and receiving yards and man coverage. He's just going to have to get doubled more. These are adjustments that teams are going to make this offseason. And I think that guy that opens up may not be Gabe Davis. I think he maybe has a little bit of a sophomore slump as teams adjust to that. But I think Emmanuel Sanders, being the veteran, being with a guy that has the big arm to really get Sanders to where he wants to be, and back to where he can be as that deep threat down the field. So I think those two things. And the last one I have in the offense is, I guess you'd call it a hot take. Look, Zach Ertz, I just don't see coming to Buffalo. A bunch of sources that I have talked to said that they have been in talks with him since March. They've been in talks with the Eagles since March, but the price is too high. And the Bills didn't go out and draft a tight end. Obviously they didn't move up or anything like that. I think that they are where they are. Again, I just don't see being managing or mortgaging so much capital to bring in Zach Ertz. And at this point, the way you get closer and closer to training camp, like the continuity is a big thing. And my concern with Dawson Knox is him just catching the football. And that's not just my concern. That's his concern, is just catching the football. That worries me. So where I look at this tight end room and I just don't see the Dawson Knox emerging as this, top 10 tight end. And I look at a guy who, when he signed here this offseason, I went, okay, big deal. But I really think that Jacob Hollister will lead the Bills tight ends in touchdowns. And I didn't know much about Jacob Hollister before the season, but the more I kind of did some more, just looked into it and to see the fit. He's about the same size as Dawson Knox, but his hands, like he can catch the football. Like there's he may not have the upside or the athleticism that Dawson Knox brings, but they're going to need to find consistency. And I think Knox will get every shot to be the number one and at least start the season like that. But I think especially in the red zone, Hollister's connection going back to Wyoming, how he wanted to come here, how he thinks he could fit into this offense, his relationship with Allen, I think that plays a big factor. And I think maybe he's that red zone target. He had 3 touchdowns. He actually had more catches last year than Dawson Knox. Like everybody thinks that Dawson Knox is one step away from becoming this, top 10 tight end in the league. I just don't see it. Whereas he had 24 catches last year. Yes, he had COVID. Yes, he had injuries. Yes, he dealt with all that stuff. But I didn't know who Jacob Hollister really was last year. And he had 25 catches in Seattle's offense. So there is potential I actually see because of the connection and because of the familiarity with Josh Allen. They both had 3 touchdowns last year. So this isn't like a crazy thing to think like, wow, Jacob Hollister's got, he's a nobody. Well, he knows Josh Allen. They played together at Wyoming. They were close there. They talked about their connection. So I think Hollister at the end of the season will be the Bills tight end that has the most touchdown catches. And I didn't think I would say that on July 19th when he signed this offseason, because it was one of those signings where I went, all right. But the more I looked into it, the more concerns that I continue to have with Knox. Obviously, if Knox has a great training camp, but like these are my hot takes leading into training camp. And then on the other side of the ball, maybe my big one, and it's a guy I'm just so high on. And that's just not from what I've seen. It's from what I've heard from teammates. It's what I've heard from Bean and McDermott, who are guys that just don't say something if they don't mean it. When we talk to guys, when we talk to them and we'll ask them questions like, hey, what do you see about this wide receiver? If that wide receiver or that person isn't doing anything, he'll lump in the question. Sean McDermott is great at it. He'll lump in the question and be like, well, all of the wide receivers are working really hard and they're all trying to get better every day. But when we've asked this season about AJ Epinesa this offseason, they just don't stop talking about AJ Epinesa. So I think, and obviously they drafted 2 tight ends at the top of the, they drafted 2 defensive ends to open this draft with Boogie Basham and with Gregory Rousseau. I just keep looking back to Epinesa. And I just keep looking back, and I think he's the guy that will lead the Bills in sacks in 2021. Yeah, it's a little bit of a reach from a guy that had 1.5 last year, but such a unique season for a rookie to deal with what he had to deal through and not having OTAs and not having mini camps. And this guy worked so hard to cut down weight where they wanted him to be that he lost too much weight and pretty much was playing too small. He wasn't even active week 1. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the season, he's the one getting the reps over some of the other guys. And you heard Leslie Frazier talk about him and how he's progressed. And you hear, Brandon Beane unprompted at the end of the year presser saying, how encouraged they were through the second half of the season. And hear Sean McDermott this offseason talking about how he stayed in Buffalo to get his body right. And then you hear Deion Dawkins say, like, when I put my hands on him this year, like it feels different. Because now he's right with his weight. And this was a guy that at Iowa, his freshman year, played sparingly, had 3.5 sacks, showed flashes, but he's not that really, again, just like at the combine, he's not going to wow you with like raw traits like a Greg Rousseau will do. But I just look at his second year then, things jumped off the table where he went from 3.5 sacks his first year at Iowa to 10.5 to 11.5. And I really think that he can be a 7.5, 8 sack season guy. And while Jerry Hughes hasn't gotten home a ton, he has forced a lot of pressures. And I think that Epinesa will be the guy that benefits from him and benefits from Starback and Ed Oliver and all those guys. Like, I really like what I think the potential can be. Almost treating last year for me, like Epinesa, it was his redshirt season. But I just think the way that they talk about him with his body, the way that he has stayed in Buffalo this entire offseason to get his body right, like that says something to me. And I had no idea. I had to look up who had the most sacks last year for the Bills, and it was A.J. Klein. And I think he had 3 in the Seattle game. Like, this was a weird team where things just didn't go right at times. And I think as the offense continues to get better, teams will have to throw more. Epinesa gets to pin his ears back. Jerry Hughes gets to pin his ear back. And I really think that you're going to need to give some time to Gregory Rousseau, who didn't play football at all last year. So I just look at a guy like A.J. Epinesa as being the one that will lead the Bills in sacks this season. And finally, my 5th hot take. Again, you can read up all of them, more description. I'm breaking it down now, but it's worth going on buffaloplus.com to read the article. Is also just the fact that my last one is Levi Wallace will lead the Bills in interceptions. And I compared Levi Wallace, and I meant this as the biggest compliment I could be. He's like that ugly, dirty penny you just can't get rid of, because every time everybody wants Levi Wallace to lose his starting job, he makes some play or proves the doubters wrong, just like he has as a walk-on at Alabama and undrafted, all of those things. He just doesn't go away. And so I think he holds off Dane Jackson. I know there's so much hype around him for what his small sample size was. The Bills didn't sign a cornerback until the 7th round. I don't think Richard Sherman's the answer, obviously, with what he's going through. I think this is the secondary they're going to go with. And because Trey White is who Trey White is and how good he is, teams just don't throw his way. So by effect, the result of that is that Levi Wallace gets targeted more than pretty much any cornerback in the league. It'll give him more opportunities to make picks, and I think he does make enough plays. I can see him getting 4 to 5 interceptions this year. Again, teams needing to throw to match and stay pace with the Bills' offense. I just think that this is a guy where every single time we've counted out Levi as he's going to lose his job or somebody's going to take his job, he just doesn't. And he just sticks around, and he's tough, and he is the epitome of Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane defense that has just fit in so well. So those are my 5 takeaways. Again, Josh Allen leads the Bills in rushing yards this season. Emmanuel Sanders will have 1,000 yards along with Stephon Diggs. They'll be the first pair of wide receiver duos in Buffalo to have 1,000 yards in the same season since Peerless Price and Eric Moulds in 2002. I think Jacob Hollister has more touchdowns than any other Bills tight end. I think that A.J. Epinesa will lead the Bills in sacks this upcoming season, and Levi Wallace will lead them in interceptions. Those are my 5 Fates hot takeaways, hot takes heading into the Bills season. Again, plenty more coverage as always. We'll be following this. Tons more stuff coming up on buffaloplus.com, as well as following here. Like and subscribe, please. It really helps the channel. I know Mike has done a couple of these. I wanted to give it a shot. Let me know what you guys thought about it. They're my 5 hot takes. Again, hope you liked them. Stay tuned. Plenty more coming up as the Bills will start training camp next week. We'll have everything for you covered right here on buffaloplus.com. Thanks.